A listener note. This story contains adult content and language.
You have 2 unheard messages. First unheard message.
Jonathan, this guy is a killer. You really shouldn't trust this guy. I'm serious. He's dangerous. Don't mess around. Call me.
Aquí usted va a conocer a Popeye. Andrés Pastrana Arango lo secuestré yo. Coloqué un helicóptero a hacer la ruta Medellín-Bogotá.
I'm in a discreet hotel in Medellin, Colombia, sitting across from a man who is admitted to having personally murdered roughly 300 people and played a hand in the deaths of over 3,000. 3 decades ago, he was the chief Sicario for Pablo Escobar and the Medellin Cartel. In case you don't know, Sicario means assassin in Spanish. Jhon Jairo Velasquez Vasquez, spelled Jhon, or as he is more commonly known, Popeye. In Spanish, they say Popeye. Sitting directly across the table from me, he speaks willingly, answers all my questions, offers explanations, and so on. And while I listen, I keep having this distraction in my mind. It's the number, 300. It's surreal. I refocus to keep my head in the game. Popeye is describing in detail how he kidnapped the former mayor of Bogotá.
And you hit him, or you hit him. But, so then, did he collapse, or did you drag him out?
No, inconsciente no. Lo golpeamos con la pistola en el pecho.
So he put a gun in his chest.
Sí, pero no quedó inconsciente, no. Yo lo saco de él ahí, con la cabeza de él pegada a la mía y apuntando la pistola aquí para los dos.
And you had other people with you?
Sí, claro.
How many?
Yo llevaba 12 hombres.
12. Oh, okay. That's a big number. So,
because of his position in the cartel, Popeye features quite prominently in the history of Medellin.
Se busca a Pablo Escobar. Recompensa 2,700.
Con Jhon Jairo Velasquez Vasquez. ¿Usted por qué se entrega de nuevo a la justicia?
Porque no le debo nada a la...
A Colombian hired killer known as Popeye has been released from prison.
Hola, guerreras y guerreros. Yo soy su amigo Jhon Jairo Velasquez Vasquez, conocido como Popeye.
Alias Popeye, mi señorón.
Yo soy Jhon Jairo Velasquez Vasquez Popeye.
When you think of the major cities of the world, images immediately come to mind. Paris, the Eiffel Tower. London, Big Ben. New York, the Empire State Building. But when you mention Medellin, to most people, the image that comes to mind is not a landmark, but rather of a man. Pablo Escobar. The word complicated was created for this place. It's a city that for many years lived on the edge of disorder and terror. Not long ago, Medellin was the murder capital of the world. And while the city is undergoing a rebirth, and even a renaissance of sorts, Medellin is a city where its questions still outnumber the answers. From Exclave Media, this is The Sicario Effect. I'm Jonathan Branstein. Part 1, Popeye the Sicario. I've been fascinated by narco culture for a long time. I grew up in Chicago, where you learn about Al Capone at an early age. I feel like I knew about gangsters long before sports or entertainment figures. When I was around 10 or 11, my dad let me watch The Godfather on TV with him. The idea of the mafia was fascinating to me. How it worked, the power, etc. I imagined what it would be like to be in the mafia. After seeing The Godfather, I became a pretty big fan of gangster films. The characters in these films were exclusively Italian. A few years later, my mind expanded when my friend Tim got a pirated VHS copy of Scarface. Watching it was transformative. Here was a different kind of gangster. A cocaine kingpin. Al Pacino playing Tony Montana. It captured my imagination. My friends and I watched the movie endlessly and repeated the lines so many times. To this day, I still know most of the movie by heart. However, what fascinated me most wasn't the film's main character, Tony Montana. No, I was most intrigued by the Bolivian drug lord character, Alejandro Sosa, played brilliantly by the actor Paul Schneer.
I think you and me, we can work this thing out. We do business together a long time. Just remember, I only tell you one time. Don't fuck me, Tony. Don't you ever try to fuck me.
The Sosa character was actually based on a real Bolivian drug lord named Roberto Suarez Gomez, alias El Rey de Cocaína, or the King of Cocaine. Years later, I read a terrific book called Killing Pablo by Mark Bowden. It's the anatomy of the capture and killing of Pablo Escobar. Bowden, who also wrote Black Hawk Down, gave a compelling account of the last several years of Pablo's life. Unlike certain subjects, this one fascinated me. I couldn't put the book down. I read it twice. I wanted more. At one point in the book, Bowden described the standoff at La Catedral, or the Cathedral. In case you don't know, La Catedral was the prison that Pablo Escobar designed and built for himself. On July 22nd, 1992, La Catedral was stormed by the Colombian army in an attempt to remove Pablo and place him into a more restrictive prison. In his detailed description of the event, he wrote about one of Pablo's men. Bowden described him as a round-faced thug with slightly crossed eyes, a man shorter than Pablo, who, unlike the others, looked lean and wild. This was the one they called Popeye, the notorious Medellin Sicario, Jhon Jairo Velasquez. I remember being struck at his name. All of Pablo's other men had nicknames that were in Spanish and didn't translate the same. Popeye was taken from the name of the cartoon character, Popeye the Sailor. I guess it was through that strange word memory association, but from that moment on, I always remembered Pablo employed a guy named Popeye. One of those weird things, or what seemed like a useless piece of information in my brain. I remember the first time I heard the name Pablo Escobar. It was in my parents' living room. I remember my father saying, "The Forbes list is out, and there's a drug dealer on it." I was immediately intrigued. On October 5th, 1987, Forbes magazine published its first ever, and now famous, Forbes list. This list was more exclusive than the Forbes 400, which the magazine first published 5 years earlier, listing the world's 400 richest people. The new Forbes list was comprised only of the world's billionaires, all 96 of them. Pablo Escobar featured quite prominently on the list, ranking in the top 20 of the richest people in the world, placing him in rarefied territory, alongside industrialists, land barons, heirs, and innovators. He would remain on this list for the next 7 years. From my earliest recollections, I learned who Pablo Escobar was because he was on the Forbes list. In an age without Google or easy access to information, the Forbes list would become the metric or gold standard index for charting wealth in the world. The publication was a huge success. It turned out the public had a huge appetite for wanting to know about rich people. This, of course, isn't a new phenomenon. Throughout history, people have always been interested in who lives better than them and how they made their money. It's almost an early example of branding. But the media latched onto the term Forbes list and propelled it way beyond the average Forbes reader. The list became part of the zeitgeist. It transcended socio-economic boundaries. I've traveled to a number of countries, particularly poor countries, and have seen the power of the brand. From Mexico to Colombia to West Africa, I'm continually amazed how people know of the Forbes list. Some don't even know it was a magazine, but they know the list. Since its publication in 1987, the list has almost always included drug lords from Pablo Escobar to Chapo Guzman. While it wasn't the intention of Forbes magazine, nonetheless, the publication of the list marks the birth of global narco culture and helped amplify the ever-growing narrative of narco kingpins and their lifestyles. On October 8th, 1992, Jhon Jairo Velasquez Vasquez, alias Popeye, Pablo's brother, Roberto de Jesus Escobar Gaviria, alias El Osito, and a third man, Otoniel de Jesus Gonzalez, alias Otto, turned themselves into the Colombian authorities and were immediately taken to the Itagüí prison in Medellin. Here's an actual interview conducted by television reporter Marcela Duran of Noticiero Nacional in the backseat of a car as the three men were en route to surrender to the authorities. Seated left to right is Otto, Popeye, and Roberto Escobar, who shields his face from the camera and remains silent. It's a brief interview, only 47 seconds. Rather than lay in translation, I'll summarize it at the end.
Entrevista con Jhon Jairo Velasquez Vasquez. ¿Usted por qué se entrega de nuevo a la justicia?
Porque no le debo nada a la justicia. Y si me fuguera, porque nos iban a matar. Y aquí vuelvo a poner la cara a ver qué es lo que va a pasar.
¿Usted por qué se entrega a la justicia, doctor?
Pues para arreglar esta situación de que a toda hora persiguiéndonos y y esto lo tenemos que arreglar como sea, entonces aquí volvemos a ver.
¿Qué garantías tiene el gobierno de que ustedes no se vuelvan que vuelva a suceder lo mismo en la cárcel de Envigado?
Pues que estamos volviendo a entregarnos.
¿Quién está matando a los policías en Medellín?
De eso no sé nada porque yo estaba escondido.
¿Quién pasó con la jueza?
Nosotros de eso no sabemos nada, nosotros hace tiempo que no estábamos por aquí, entonces no tenemos conocimiento de nada.
¿Cuándo se va a entregar Escobar?
Hace mucho tiempo no hablamos con él.
In summary, the female reporter asked Popeye, "Why are you turning yourself in again?" To which he replied, "Because I'm square with the law, and if we broke out, it was because they were going to come and kill us. So here I am, showing my face to see what's going to happen." She then turns to Otto. "What guarantees does the government have that you're not going to break out again like you did at Envigado?" Otto shoots back, "Well, we came back and turned ourselves in." She then shifts back to Popeye. "Who's killing the police in Medellin?" Popeye responds fast, "I don't know anything because I've been hiding." Sensing the men are in a hurry, she directs her last question towards Otto. "When is Escobar coming in?" Otto shrugs. "It's been a while since we talked to him." Popeye was sentenced to 30 years in prison on charges of terrorism, drug trafficking, conspiracy for terrorist purposes, and murder. Popeye has publicly admitted to personally killing roughly 300 people and being partly responsible for the deaths of around 3,000. He served 23 years and 3 months in jail and was released in late August of 2014. The story of Popeye is very unique. It's rare that you come across someone, good or evil, who's had such a profound impact on a country's history. Ironically, his journey is not finished. After his release from prison, Popeye's life began a new chapter. Popeye the Repentant. Now we jump ahead, way ahead, to present day. For the last 20 years, I've worked in the entertainment industry. I manage some well-known comedians and develop and produce some television shows and comedy specials. I love doing it. It's a big part of my life. Another part of my life is traveling. To date, I've been to 77 countries. I want to understand cultures other than my own, especially the people. Originally, I had an idea of creating a podcast. The premise was quite simple, but totally unoriginal. A conversation with interesting people. As I thought further about who I wanted to interview, the first thing I decided was I wouldn't pursue someone from the world of entertainment, which now seems ironic. Over the last several years, I've been captivated by narco culture and its profound impact on society across the globe. If only I could speak with the godfather of narco culture, Pablo Escobar. That led me to this.
Hola guerreras y guerreros, yo soy su amigo Jhon Jairo Velasquez Vasquez, conocido como Popeye. Familia de Instagram, YouTube, Facebook y Twitter. Caluroso y respetuoso saludo.
In 1976, the great American satirist Paddy Chayefsky won an Academy Award for his screenplay, Network. The film gave a prophetic vision of the future of television and entertainment as a whole. It depicted the absurdity of what networks would do for ratings. In the film, Faye Dunaway plays an aggressive young network executive who views the news as entertainment. Much to the shock of the old guard establishment, she takes over the news division, making once unthinkable programming choices by giving airtime to terrorists, criminals, and even a live suicide. Her plan works, and the network's ratings go through the roof. When Paddy Chayefsky wrote Network, there were only 3 television networks, yet he perfectly predicted the future of media. The news and entertainment landscape is, of course, different today. Twitter, YouTube, Snapchat, and Instagram are replacing the old delivery devices of NBC, CBS, CNN, etc. But Chayefsky's vision of the future remains spot on. Since his release from jail, using YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram, Popeye has discovered that he's a perfect fit for today's new media. Enter Popeye, the new media star.
Hola, yo soy su amigo Jhon Jairo Velasquez Vasquez, Popeye, alias.
During the last few years of his sentence, Popeye penned an autobiographical account of his time in jail after leaving Pablo Escobar. Titled Surviving Pablo Escobar, Popeye, the Hitman, 23 years and 3 months in prison. In Spanish, it sounds better. Sobreviviendo Escobar, Popeye, el Sicario, 23 años y 3 meses de cárcel. The book, written in third person, gives a detailed breakdown of the 3 major groups that occupy Colombia's prisons: the narco-traffickers, the paramilitaries, and the guerrillas, all fighting each other for control of the prison. Popeye found himself in the middle of everything, and with a target on his back, he used all his skills and street smarts to keep alive and live to tell the tale. Shortly after the book was released in 2015, Caracol TV, one of the major Colombian television networks, optioned the book to turn it into a TV series. Production began shortly afterwards. Then, in June of the following year, the streaming service Netflix announced they had inked an exclusive licensing agreement for 2 new TV series produced by Caracol. Surviving Pablo Escobar, alias JJ, would be the first series under that deal. Caracol had previously partnered with Netflix on their epic mega-series El Patrón del Mal, or The Lord of Evil, a massive 75-episode series chronicling the life of Pablo Escobar. On August 1st, 2017, the series Surviving Escobar, alias JJ, debuted. In total, 69 one-hour episodes were readily available for viewing across all Netflix streaming platforms, providing a huge boost of momentum to Jhon Jairo Velasquez Vasquez's media presence. Yeah, I watched all 69 episodes. More on that later. From his social media platforms, Popeye's engaged in a variety of subjects, from recounting his exploits with Pablo Escobar and the Medellin Cartel, to his strong opinions on the government peace treaty with the FARC guerrillas, to shout-outs with his legions of fans peppered in between rants. Fortunately, he also sold books. At that time, the only place you could buy a copy of his book was directly from him. I think it was because he didn't have a publisher in the United States, and it wasn't on Amazon. Thinking this would be the best place to start, I sent an email, which was answered almost immediately. The email contained specific instructions. I was to send money via Western Union to a person that we'll call Carlos. Once the transfer was sent, Western Union would give me a tracking number needed to pick up the money. I would then send the following to Carlos: the tracking code and my cell phone number used on WhatsApp, the popular mobile messaging and calling app with end-to-end encryption. Walking back to my car from the Western Union office, a thought went through my head. When you buy a book on Amazon, you get a tracking number and a guaranteed date of delivery. I've just wired money to a former member of the Medellin Cartel. I'm pretty far from Amazon now. Several minutes later, my phone alerted me that I had a text. It was on WhatsApp. My heart beat faster. It was an unrecognized number that began with +57, the country code for Colombia. Hola, amigo. Hola, Popeye, I responded, writing back in Spanish. Actually, it's Jonathan. Popeye responded, Okay, amigo. No problem, Jonathan. Prayer hands emoticon. We went back and forth. I asked him if he got the money. He confirmed and said he'd have my books ready to send by Monday. He then asked me a series of questions about my nicknames, hobbies, and dreams. He needed it for a dedication he wanted to write. All of our communications were by WhatsApp. One of the messages included a photo of him holding up my book with the inscription written inside of it. Getting the photo was further confirmation that I was communicating with the real guy. Not that I didn't believe him previously, but, well, you know, with the internet and all. The inscription read, Todos los caminos conducen a Medellin. All roads lead to Medellin. By my estimation, there are only a handful of individuals living who can claim being a former inner circle member of the Medellin Cartel. Currently, 3 of them are in the U.S., one in a supermax prison in Colorado, while the other 2 are housed in maximum security penitentiaries. Given Popeye's affinity towards media attention, I viewed this not only as a real possibility, but as an opportunity to gain a first-hand account of both the inner workings of the cartel and an understanding about his claim of repentance and newfound celebrity. It can be tough to wrap your head around Popeye. For those who don't know anything about him, think about it this way. If Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber, hadn't been executed, but instead was paroled from prison after 20 years and became a YouTube star where he ranted on and on about the government, posed for selfies with admirers, sold t-shirts with his face on it, and signed copies of the Turner Diaries, and then had his own Netflix series. I realize my comparison isn't perfect, but I think you get the idea. Given that I was now communicating with Popeye, I took the opportunity to ask for an interview. My first text went unanswered. After a few more unsuccessful attempts, I was about to give up, until finally he responded, Claro que sí, amigo. Cuando desean venir. Of course, my friend. When do you want to come? Without any hesitation, I responded with a date. And just like that, the former chief assassin for the Medellin Cartel had agreed to my interview. The plan was that I would fly into Medellin on Saturday, November 11th. Popeye and I had agreed I would interview him on Monday, November 13th. With the date set, I had to get a few things in motion, quickly. My Spanish is fine for traveling. However, there's no way I was going to attempt to do the interview in Spanish, especially with the Paisa accent. I wanted my friend Paula Laramendi to be the translator. Paula lives in Havana, Cuba, and works in film production. She was on board to meet me in Medellin and translate and help with production. Unfortunately, she couldn't get her visa in time. Americans don't need a visa to travel to Colombia. However, Cubans need a visa to go anywhere. One of the reasons I asked Paula to translate was because I thought it might make the interview more comfortable for everyone. In my travels, I've seen where locals can sometimes have a bias against other locals. The expression, familiarity breeds contempt, can happen. Also, because Popeye's quite a controversial figure, I was concerned that a local translator might get offended or there'd be some added tension in the room. Either way, Paula was going to eliminate all of those concerns. By the way, in case you're wondering, the voicemails you heard in the beginning were Paula. Clearly, she was concerned about my safety in Medellin. To find a translator, I turned to the only two Colombians I know, Juan Felipe Orozco and Esteban Orozco. The Orozco brothers are a producer, writer, director team from Medellin. After making some successful films in Colombia, the brothers relocated to L.A. Esteban was also a writer on the popular Netflix series El Chapo. After emailing back and forth with Esteban about finding a translator, he asked me about who I'm interviewing. I then decided to call him.
Yeah, hello?
Esteban.
Hey.
Hey, man. So, thank you for taking my call. I really appreciate it.
No, it's okay, man.
So, as I said in my email, I'm going to Medellin. I'm going down to record a podcast. Well, okay, actually, I'm going to interview a guy who is somewhat controversial. The guy that we're going to interview is this guy, Jhon Jairo Velasquez Vasquez, alias Popeye.
I really hate that fucking guy, man.
So I take it you don't buy the whole repentant thing then? If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. Seriously, it helps. I hate bothering everybody for this, but I gotta do it. Please visit our website for a full list of credits and some cool bonus materials, like photos, videos, and declassified documents at thesicarioeffect.com. If you're not sure how to spell it, it's the name of the podcast. Or you can follow us on Instagram at The Sicario Effect, or on Twitter at Sicario Effect. There is no the in the handle. And on Facebook at Exclave Media. I'm Jonathan Branstein, your host and writer. The show is produced by me, Caitlin Tyrrell, Ernie Hurtado, and Matt Olson. Our editor is William Broughton. Our engineer, sound design, and mix, Ernie Hurtado. Co-producer, Esteban Orozco. Music composed by Preston Nowakowski. Artwork, Juan Felipe Orozco. Additional music is composed by William Broughton. Interview translator, Alejandro Caseño. Additional translation, Juliet Restrepo, Christina Madrid. Production support was provided by Daniel Urria. Special thanks to Laura Kate Jones, Mauricio Builes, Alejandro Brugas, Alejandro Doring, Alexandra Doring, Tim Fufus, Tom Freston, Ross Bernard, Kelvin Wells II, Saad Moseni, Yoshi Obayashi, Jeff Frankel, Stephen Molina, and the fabulous Los Hermanos Orozco. Additional thanks to the Museo Casa de la Memoria in Medellin, the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library, the George Bush Presidential Library and Museum, Michael Pinckney, Mary Finch, Iafit Medellin, Luisa Garces. Also, please visit the Narco Tour project at narcotour.co. That's narcotour.co. This podcast is dedicated to the memory of Guillermo Cano, Anthony Bourdain, and Larry Bresner. Scarface clip is used with permission from NBC Universal Studios.